Now, on page 13, we get introduced to these really not ominous, that's weird, that's wrong, these really general and hippie-ish terms. He's talking to the old woman and said, dreams are the language of God. When he speaks in our language, I can interpret what he has said. But if he speaks in the language of the soul, it is only you who can understand. But whichever it is, I'm going to charge you for the consultation. Now, it's easy to misinterpret and to mix up the things between the language of God, language of the soul, and language of the dreams, language of the birds and the trees and the sand and the sunflowers or whatever. And ultimately, you don't. I mean, I want you to pay attention when you read, but you don't have to worry about keeping track on what is the language of the soul versus the language of God or language of dreams and all that, because ultimately, Coelho is introducing these terms to try to be as general as possible, to be able to communicate to as many audiences as he can, or as wide an audience as he can. So when he says the language of the soul, I mean, that could mean anything, right? I mean, some people think that some people don't believe in the soul. Some people think that the soul resides somewhere deep in their heart, in the center of their mass of their body. Some people think their soul is their third eye in their brain or whatever. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, right? What Coelho was talking about, and even if you don't believe in the soul, doesn't matter. You understand the concept of what a soul is, unless you're some kind of cyborg that, I don't know. I won't get into my RoboCop speech, but the idea of the language of the soul is the idea of general consciousness about yourself, who you are, right? Your morals, your values, and whether or not you believe in the soul or not. That idea, that general consciousness and self-awareness, and that's ultimately what it becomes about, is self-awareness and becoming what you feel you ought to. Okay, on 14, the woman is talking to him. Says, "It is a dream in the language of the world. I can interpret it, but the interpretation is very difficult. That's why I feel that I deserve part of what you find." And I mean, he has to go to the pyramids and Egypt, and let's see. Hold on, I lost it. Okay, so we've got his treasure that'll make him a rich man. And where does she say something out of a child? Where is that on here? I don't have it underlined.
If the child said it didn't exist, was that it?
No, where is it? Oh yeah, and it's in his dreams. So the child went on playing with my sheep for quite a while, and suddenly the child took me by both hands and transported me to the Egyptian pyramids. Okay, why is it important that it's a child in his dreams? Yeah, but why? But it could be. But why a child? Why not an old lady or his father or whatever?
Just like the sheep, you can trust them.
Well, the sheep trust, right, and a child trusts, and that's another biblical, like, hearkening to back to the Bible and saying that, you know, people should have faith like a child, or having a childlike faith, because children haven't really been. Well, first of all, she says it's a dream in the language of the world, and what marks the faith of children versus the faith of an adult is that children haven't lived in the world. They haven't encountered the world, because the world makes you. I mean, the world shatters your dreams, doesn't it? Because we're confronted with reality, and that's the idea, is that the world, once you are confronted with the realities of the world, either how to adjust your faith or how to adjust your dreams and your vision, what you hope to accomplish, and not giving up on that, versus, it's not one of those things where it's Coelho is trying to get you to be completely oblivious to reality, but trying to find a happy medium between pursuing your dreams or your goals or whatever you wish, and not giving up that faith versus having faith that you can fly and then going and jumping off the top of a building and believing that you can like a child could. Having this childlike faith in a very real world. And that's why she says the dream in the language of the world, but the interpretation is very difficult because it is in the language of the world. On 16, he has here a kind of interesting or a funny kind of a side note, and we'll see these throughout the novel, where he'll just have kind of his own little lessons that he sprinkles in throughout, that they tie in with his overall worldview, but they're not. But they're kind of tangents, kind of offshoots. So it says here, everyone seems to have a clear idea of how other people should lead their lives, but none about his or her own, which seems to be very true. And that's that's a very it's a very true statement, and something to be taken away from it. But there's not much to explain. It's just one of those things where, as you're going along, like through this book, there are these little, like I said, just tangents, just little quips that he just kind of throws in here and there. Now on 16, as well, in the middle of the page, he kind of addresses the reader here in a funny way. He says he started to read the book he had bought. On the very first page, it described a burial ceremony, and the names of it, the people involved, were very difficult to pronounce. If he ever wrote a book, he thought, he would present one person at a time so that the reader wouldn't have to worry about memorizing a lot of names. Why is that funny?
Because that's what he's doing.
Yeah, how many names do we actually have here? How many names have we been introduced to?
Santiago.
Right, Santiago, and then there's Father, and then the old lady, but it's just Santiago, really.
I kind of forgot his name because they don't really say it that much.
Right, because again, it's not about the plot. That's why the plot is so simple. That's why there's not a lot of characters. It's about the plot is second to the message that he's trying to get across, which is really interesting, because this is one of the few books that that is actually still a good book that people can enjoy and be entertained by, and still and have the story be secondary to the message. Most of the time, a book has to be very, very, very discreet and quiet about the fact that it's got a message behind it. That's why in literature, that's why you have literature classes where the professor will actually sit down and unpack and wade through all of the layers of disguise to get through the actual message of the story. And this one, it's just right below the surface, and you could argue that the actual message is, or that the story is secondary to the message, because the messages here are all throughout this novel, told through these short these small little increments of stories and parables. But the plot itself, the overall plot from point A to point B, and the climax and the decline, the rise and the fall, that's secondary. And it's difficult to write a book that can be as entertaining as this, and have the message still be paramount and be the first thing that to be obvious getting across. On 18, we can easily scroll, kind of blow through these pages, because he keeps on repeating the same message over and over again, just in different variations. Says, what's the world's greatest lie? The boy asked. It's this: that at a certain point in our lives, we lose control of what's happening to us, and our lives become controlled by fate. That's the world's greatest lie. That's never happened to me, the boy said. They wanted me to become a priest, but I decided to become a shepherd. Much better, because you really like to travel. Now, again, this whole thing about the world's greatest lie, it's repeating that, or in the same vein as the whole idea about the shepherd and the childlike faith. I mean, that's why we give up on our childhood dreams, because we ultimately, well, it depends on what your childhood dream is. But we're not talking in extremes. We're not talking about, I don't know, whatever childhood dream you may have had about being adopted from as a, I don't know, I don't know, some kind of unrealistic childhood dream versus something that is a realistic, like, childhood dream, like a cliche one is like being an astronaut, right? That's not unrealistic. But you know what we always say is that reality happens, the world happens, and so that kind of shatters our childhood dreams or our childhood fantasies or notions and faith that we might have. And this, again, is just a variation on that theme, which is that at a certain point in our lives, which most people would call becoming an adult, we lose control of what's happening to us, and our lives become controlled by fate. That's the world's greatest lie. And what he means here is that not literally controlled by fate, but the sense that whenever you leave that point of becoming a child and truly become an adult, and most of the time that happens through some kind of, I don't know, some kind of semi-traumatic event, and people lose, like I said, their childhood faith or dreams in this case, and they think, well, okay, well, this is not what I always thought life was going to be like. This must be the real world. I mean, that's what my father always said. Anytime something bad always happened, my dad always said, "Welcome to the real world," right? Well, welcome to the real world. Like, okay. And that kind of attitude, that idea, like, welcome to the real world, this is reality, this is real life, and there's nothing that you can do about it. So you might as well, and that's true, yes, this is the real world, you know, we're not children anymore, but that doesn't mean abandon what you've always, you know, hoped for, what you've always dreamed for, or what you've always had faith in, just because, you know, it doesn't mean that just because one reality exists, the other reality can't. So on 19, we're introduced to another name here. It's his name at the bottom of 19. Would anyone care to venture how you say his name? I'm going to get a refill. You guys ponder that. 5 points to a winner.
Yeah.
Anyone? Any takers? Close. Melchizedek. Melchizedek. Yeah. Melchizedek. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't even know what I was going to get 5 points on. It was just motivation. I am. Yeah. So Melchizedek is a biblical character as well, in the sense that he shows up in the Bible twice. Once in the Old Testament, once in the New Testament, and he is one of the most widely. I'd never heard of the guy before. He's one of the most widely debated characters in the Bible because so little is known about him. Where does it say he was born?
Salem.
He is the king of Salem. Salem, he also says that in the Bible. No one knows where Salem is in the Bible. It's not on any of the maps. In the Old Testament, there was not a town that people inhabited that was called Salem. In the Old Testament, we're introduced to Melchizedek because Abraham was coming back from basically killing kings. And for those of you that may not know, Abraham's like the granddaddy of the Old Testament. Like,